Hello, WestJet Pilots and other podcast listeners. My name's Captain Chris Tholl, and welcome to this episode of PIREP. We're out here in Vancouver. Joining me today, I have Captain Bernie Lewall. How you doing, Bern?
Good, Chris. You?
I'm doing well, thanks. And, we have our latest elected, freshly minted First Officer, Vignesh, joining us today. He is the new Secretary-Treasurer of the WestJet MEC. Thanks for joining us, Vig.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Vignesh, your first time on the podcast here. I think it's important we take some time, get to know you a little bit with the listeners. Tell us a little about yourself, where you come from, the experience you bring to the union.
Thanks, Chris. Just about 10 years ago in 2014, I immigrated to Canada for the first time. Did my initial flight training at Sunwing, Manitoba. Instructed over there, moved on to Thompson, Manitoba to fly for Calm Air. I was the first officer representative over there. When I got my opportunity at WestJet in 2019, just about 6 years ago, I took that, moved to Toronto. Then very close came the pandemic, and at that point, I took the opportunity to do my MBA. Came back to WestJet at the recall, served as the membership volunteer coordinator, and then the LEC 234 Secretary-Treasurer. When the opportunity came up to serve the MEC as the MEC Secretary-Treasurer with the resignation of Jason Roberts, I took that with both hands, and I'm grateful for the local status reps for nominating me. I look forward to serving the association to the best that I can with everything that I've done so far, and I look forward to working with Bernie and yourself.
Well, that's awesome. What a resume. LEC rep at Calm Air, volunteer rep and the membership committee. You did the Secretary-Treasurer, and now you're MEC. I mean, it's a pleasure to have you, Vignesh. Thank you so much for volunteering and putting your hand up, and I certainly look forward to serving out the rest of the term alongside you.
I'll second that, Vignesh. Both of us look forward to working with you over the next couple of years here.
Strap in, Vig. Hang on. Things happen quick at the MEC level, as most of our members know. Lots of changes. Speaking of changes, let's talk about the show today, Bernie. We got talks about pension. We're going to be talking about the merger, carry-on baggage message that was sent via Telegram a couple weeks ago, and we're also going to talk about a little bit of a pest problem near the end of the show. Anything hot burning on your mind, Bernie, that you've been watching, possibly, whether it's darts or friends or, industry-wide? What's happening?
Yeah, I think one thing that we should bring up here, Chris, right at the start of this podcast is Air Canada actually put a video out, thinking it kind of stroked a lot of our pilots the wrong way. They tried to distance themselves from the WestJet pilot group, saying that they were different. They flew international routes, and
right.
They didn't.
I've seen that video.
Yeah, and it rubbed
a lot
of people the wrong way. And to be clear,
it was the Air Canada Pilots, not Air Canada, the company. I just want that.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry if I misspoke there. The Air Canada MEC. We did talk to the MEC over there and expressed our frustration and our concerns with the message they were putting out. Now, to be fair to their MEC, what they are trying to do is take our contract, which is a good contract, and I think we're about 25% uplift on their pay right now, and they want to leapfrog us, and we want them to leapfrog us as well, so that we can catch up and get ahead of them for CA3. So I understand the sentiment behind it, but the way it was presented was a little off the mark.
Yeah, I'm with you, Bernie. I get what they're doing. They're trying to get, that North American standard wage, or what they're calling a world-class contract, and all the power to them at that point. I think it just got lost on our membership, and we have to acknowledge that as the MEC, that we understand the frustrations from all the messages we've been getting, and they have been addressed. We just asked the membership to understand, what Air Canada's goals are, and at the end of the day, Vig, they are our goals.
Absolutely have to be our goals, because when you realize that we're all together in this industry trying to better the profession in Canada towards making this a more sustainable industry for people to come towards and build towards, so that we make this a better profession to all of us.
So let me just wrap this segment of the podcast up by saying that Charlene did reach out to me personally and just expressed her frustration, I guess, that the message came out the way it did, and they'll do better in the future.
So, Bernie, the pension's coming along nicely. The other hot topic that we have, obviously, within the association is that of the merger between WestJet and Sunwing. Can you give us an update on where that's at as it sits right now?
Sure, Chris. You, myself, the merger committee, along with our outside legal, Dan Shields, we were out in Toronto there 2 weeks ago in mid-May, and we sat down for a good day just discussing possibilities and probabilities and coming up with a plan going into the merger talks that we're expecting later in August. But in the immediate future, there's the CRB that we're dealing with right now. So Sunwing, as of Monday, actually tomorrow for us now, this will probably be a couple days in the past by the time this podcast is released. Monday, the 24th of June, their submission is due to the CRB, and then we'll have one more week on top of that to respond. And then the next dates of import are July the 15th and the 23rd. Those are the next days that we will be in front of the CRB. And again, I think we've told this to the pilots, but there's three things that have to be decided that day. Number one, what date is the Sunwing MEC going to become represented by ALPA? And as we've already stated, we've requested that date to be August the 1st. Number two is the Sunwing contract expires November 2024. So what happens after that, between the time of the contract expiry and the time that they actually come over and are falling under our contract?
Okay.
And then the third, as you know, Chris, is the process. The SLI, the CRB wants to have clarity on that.
Right. So I think I want to just zone in on the second one. You know, obviously Sunwing having a current collective agreement and then merging with us. I think that's a big one, is when does theirs really come over? Will the CRB just say, you know what, we understand you're coming over to WestJet, which is a stronger collective agreement. We're going to extend yours until the time that WestJet can properly integrate. Or will they get it right away? I mean, these are questions that are up to the government, to the CIRB, and all the applications have been made between ourselves, the company, ALPA National, and Sunwing.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, Bernie, with these talks with Sunwing, I mean, I've been a part of them. You've been a part of them. The membership doesn't know what these interactions are like. Can you frame that for us a little bit, where, you know, we're, maybe we'll call it, dare I say, mid-merger process? How are the conversations? Are we working well together? Is it fairly controversial? What's that look like?
I think a word that has been used to describe it in the past that is apt is frosty. You know, they're
Frosty, I like it.
Yeah, we're pretty far apart, actually, from where we think is a reasonable solution to where they think is a reasonable solution. So it is pushing us down. We are going to be going to mediation with this, and most likely after the mediation to arbitration. And again, those mediation dates are scheduled for the end of August, throughout September, and then the end of October. So by October 27th, we should have a good idea of where this is going to be going. And that is, to be clear, Chris, as you know, that's the last date that we have with the arbitrator. And do you want to take it from there?
Sure, yeah. We can talk about the timeline from there, Bernie. I think it's important because I don't think everybody understands necessarily how the arbitration process works. So obviously you said we have some dates at the end of October that we're planning to conclude our arbitration on. Now, that doesn't mean that they will conclude. There is a possibility to extend if things are going well in mediation, possibly. However, there will be an end to this at some point, and people have to understand that once the arbitration is complete, we won't have an award. We won't have a decision right away. Those do take time, especially with a very complicated case like we have with Sunwing and WestJet merging, along with the fine folks at Encore. We're going to be sitting on this one for a while, is my guess, Bernie, because there's a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross from the arbitrator's position to make sure that everybody is felt represented and that his award makes sense with, you know, past case law.
Yeah, so Eli Gedeloff is the arbitrator that we'll be using. And after the final arbitration date, he has up to 3 months to actually come out with the arbitrated ruling. So that'll take us into potentially the end of February before we actually get clarity from the arbitrator. And as you know, there have been some pretty contentious pilot mergers in the past, and I'm sure Eli will want to make sure that this one is done correctly.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's very important. These arbitrations have the ability to make or break certainly an arbitrator's career, but while he's dealing with all of our careers at the same time. So I'm sure that we've selected an arbitrator, and we are confident we've selected an arbitrator that is carefully going to consider all the facts that do come into play when we're merging these two very different groups.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think that's enough on the merger for now. There is going to be some more updates, and certainly watch your fast reads and telegrams when a lot of these decisions possibly come out, maybe in July, maybe in August, but we will give you the updates in writing when they do come. Until that time, Bernie, one More interesting topic, and we've gotten some questions on this as well, is we sent a message out on our Telegram page with the MEC. For those of you that are not subscribed, like and subscribe. Below you can find in the podcast link. But that message, Bernie, was, a little hot. We had some issues, and it had to do with carry-on bags with pilots getting on aircrafts and CSAs, customer service agents, demanding that they take our bags away from us and put them in the belly of the airplane. Can you talk to us about, maybe what spawned that and the reason for that communication?
Yeah, Chris, that was about 2 weeks ago, and it was a frustrating day for both you and I. We got, you actually got called by a pilot that was asked to check his bag, and he refused. He was deadheading out to Toronto to attend some training out there for the 787.
Correct.
And after he refused, he thought that was the end of it, and then he got on the plane, and he was called up to the flight deck, and there'd been an accusation that he had been drinking. Of course, anyone on duty to be accused of drinking, that's a horrible accusation to be leveled at you. So he had a decision. He could either stay on the aircraft, and the captain said, I have no concerns. You're a foot away from me. I don't smell any alcohol, so you're welcome to go back, sit down, and I'll take you to Toronto. The pilot at the time said, I don't feel like that is the best course of action with an accusation like that. So he got off the plane, and he immediately phoned you.
Yeah.
And
yeah, sure, I can take it from there. Great job. These are uncharted territories for most of our pilots, right? And
Yeah.
they should be. These are one-off accusations that don't come up that often. And so I think he did a fantastic job evaluating the situation with an accusation as such, removing himself from the flight, contacting his union, and we spent majority of the day together with that. Of course, from this and the use of the drug and alcohol policy at WestJet, he was subject to a test, and the test, of course, resulted in a negative fashion. He was not under any influence. It did seem to be mostly retaliatory in nature because of the check bag piece, but again, this pilot did a fantastic job. His name has been cleared, obviously, from this terrible situation. We were very fortunate this happened in Calgary. I'd like to point out that, a lot of these things can help happen at outstations, and that is why we have the ALPA orange card number. So pilots, if an accusation occurs of any sort like this, your first phone call is to the orange card. And, I'll continue it on a little bit further, because one thing we haven't talked about is that exact same day when you and I were supposed to be doing that, having an office day in Calgary, we had a second one that same day. That was actually another false accusation that occurred. And this time it was because someone accused one of our captains of smelling like marijuana.
yeah, that was on a commute actually into Calgary, wasn't it? And again, an unfortunate situation that in this case was dealt with much differently and actually cleared the pilot much quicker. But
yeah, and I mean, these things can pop up. This is a reminder. We are going to be putting out future communications detailing these events a little bit more clearly, so pilots can learn and take something away from these absolutely terrible experiences that these two captains that had to go through and they had to endure. Not something you ever want to be proud of or have to go through yourself. But if you do, guys, girls, your union's here for you. We have experience with this. We will represent you and protect you, and certainly make sure the company's feet's held to the fire following their own policies.
yeah, Chris, so these guys were totally cleared. I think what's important is that we recognize that our pilots are professionals and they will do the right thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And we have a drug and alcohol policy that we do follow and we take pride in following because of the safety critical nature of our jobs.
Yeah. So getting back to the reason for the telegram, this was the reason for the telegram is there was a fairly innocuous, in our minds, exchange that we think led to a retaliatory strike. And so to prevent this happening in the future, the easiest, clearest way was for the MEC to put out a directive to the pilot group to just not check your bags and to actually stay in the aircraft at the airport of departure if you were forced to. Since then, there has been a change in company policy, and the directive now to the CSA is to not ask commuting or deadheading pilots to check their bags at the gate.
And that makes sense, right? Let's avoid the confrontation. We don't need to have tit for tat at the gate, especially when you're going out to do something as serious as training, Bernie. It's just unacceptable to be treated that way as a, 20-plus year senior captain or, even a very fresh, brand new first officer.
So, Bernie, exactly to your point, If a pilot does not want to check their bag in, they do not have to, and the company policy has changed, and we will maintain that.
Yeah, so if a pilot wants to check his bag in for convenience, for his own convenience or her own convenience, they're more than welcome to, but it's not a requirement.
Speaking of checking things in on the airplane, Bernie, we've had some concerns about rodents on the aircraft, whether it's droppings or actual visual sightings of a rat or a mouse. If you remember back, probably 2014 era, I'll say, we had some issues in Vancouver specifically, and we were closing the aircraft doors as, a precaution to reduce this. Now, we do have several aircraft. I don't know the number, Bernie. Is it between 5 and 10, we'll call it, running around with some concerns, and we needed to take a stand as an association to make sure that these were being addressed. As nobody wants to be in an aircraft with a rodent and a bunch of wires going over the Pacific or the North Atlantic for that reason.
Yeah, one of the concerns I think both of us had was Tail 325 in particular has had rodent issues for at least 3 weeks now. And rodents, if a pregnant rodent got on board, there could be one rodent or there could be 30 or 40. And I don't want rodents on my aircraft nesting in the insulation around wires, etc., right?
So, Bernie, one thing we did communicate to the pilot group was the refusal of an aircraft. And I think with the rodent issue, I'd like to just reinforce that as a captain, you have the ability to refuse an aircraft. You're not refusing to work. You're not saying this is dangerous work. You're saying, I'm not accepting this aircraft. And that's a very important difference here. And I think that's the best note to leave the rodent piece on. It's with our occupational health and safety committees working with the company. Everybody's aware of this. As long as the pilots are continuing to dart it and snag it or refuse the aircraft, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think it's caught the company's attention at this point in time too. So we are expecting a communication from them within the next probably week.
Bernie will watch for that communication. Hopefully we do see it within that week. Hey, the last thing I want to touch on before we close off the podcast today is some of the polling. As some of you participated in our poll from New Hampshire University, they called 500 pilots to get some data. The MEC put a poll together with the help of Phil Comstock and his team, and they made several calls. From those calls, Bernie, as you were aware, I'm not on that chat, but the All Bases chat, there was some concerns on some of the questions, and that's fair. We use this poll as a mid-contract survey to understand where our membership was at. How is CA2 going, where its strengths and weaknesses are, and, more of it was, where are we going to go towards CA3? So, Bern, can you touch on some of those topics? I know seniority was certainly one of those issues that we had to ask about, but let's talk about why we had to ask that.
Yeah, seniority was the biggest question, I think, that had a lot of blowback from the pilot group saying, yeah, you've got two camps, I guess, there, but the loudest was definitely, we don't want seniority. Why are we being asked about this seniority? Well, that's one of the reasons we ask questions, right, to find out what pilots want. So we just ask for people, if you're being polled by the Comstock polling company, to just give your honest opinion. I think it's worthwhile stating that in 2022, when we were doing the negotiations for CA2, we were really far behind in the polling. Our first poll was, I believe, November of 2021. We're trying to get ahead of it now. So our plan right now is to complete this poll, and it is completed now. We should be getting the data in the next 2 weeks. And then we'll have a follow-up survey come in September and probably another poll in November of this year. And we'll probably keep a very similar schedule for next year so that we can actually develop a mandate for CA3 by the end of next year, early 2026.
Yeah, and I think another important part of this, Bernie, is the company continually morphs into new interpretations of different sections of our contract, and that takes time. And I think by polling all the way through, some of those polling questions where, where some strengths and weaknesses that you see in our contract. And I think that maybe we don't even know where some weaknesses are, and that could take time. So this consistent polling idea, I think it is a good thing. It benefits us. I know when we look at the data trying to build towards CA3. And Vig, you must have a couple words to say on, what are the pilots, the feedback on some of those polling questions?
Well, polling as such, Chris, you know this better than I do. ALPA is for the pilots, by the pilots, for the benefit of the pilots. As a result of this, we may not necessarily know if 2022 data is relevant in 2024. Because of which, we need to understand if our pilots' preferences have changed in 2024, and that is the reason why we do polling today. And we need to understand if seniority as a topic has changed between 2022 and 2024, and we need to get accurate data to better represent our pilots moving forward into the future for their own benefit.
Yeah, well said, Vig. You know, sometimes as MEC, it's very easy to be so absorbed in the daily issues that you think you know what the pilot group actually wants and needs, but polling is that true opportunity to ask the membership, what is it they want? Where are their struggles? And they might have some things, and I have seen it several times in the position that I'm in, where maybe you didn't catch it all. Maybe you didn't see it that way. And so that's why polling is so important, especially with the open-ended responses. Bern, anything you want to close out on the podcast? That's all I got on my to-do list here to relay. What do you want to say?
Yeah, Chris, the one thing I'd like to acknowledge is Captain Jason Roberts, his service to the union over the last 4 years. He's left the union in a better place than when he joined it. So thank you, Jason, for your service and your time, and we look forward to seeing you again in the near future.
Absolutely. I can echo that. And I remember bringing him on as a grievance committee member back in the day and joining the team. And, man, that guy's been a rock. So, again, J-Rock, thanks, buddy. Appreciate all your time. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm sure that there's more association days in your future. Well, for now, that wraps up the podcast. Pilots, stay informed, read your fast reads, wear your lanyards, and, of course, more importantly than all, stay safe.